Welcome to the Restoration Activation Project video commentary series. Hi, Mary Ann here, and I'm glad you could join me. Well, it's been a while, hasn't it? I've been busy, though, working on a number of projects that will help you guys keep moving forward on your awakening self-mastery journeys. And I mentioned the book that I'm working on, but I'm also working on some other video courses and some tools and other products that are going to help you guys make tremendous progress. So thank you for your patience. And in any case, let's get going on today's commentary. I'm going to be examining and sort of unpacking some of the more common situations that many travelers find themselves in. And although they aren't unique to awakening and self-mastery journey travelers, they sometimes can be far more intense and sort of seem to come at us with a vengeance, so to speak, precisely because we're on this journey. And I'll explain that a little bit later. But so going to be looking at some of those kinds of negative or regressive oriented situations that hold back, that keep us back. They limit our progress on the journey, as well as looking into some of the different ways that they play out in our lives. Now, you of course are unique and your journey is unique, but I'm sure many of you will be able to relate to some of the different ways that these negative situations can play out in our lives. And either if you're not experiencing them now, you may well have in the past. So looking at that. And then I'm also going to share the way in which these situations need to be addressed, pardon me, so that they can be fully healed. Now, a number of you have done perhaps quite a bit of self-work, healing work along your way. But you've probably had some experience of, gee, something, you get faced with another challenge or some version of something that you thought you had already worked through on your journey. And the reason that's happened is because regardless of what you may have done, and I'm obviously you made some progress with the kinds of work that you've done to help resolve this and clear it out once and for all. But if you're still facing the same types of situations, even though they've got a different cast of characters maybe, or they unfold in different areas of your life, these are signs that the issue has not been fully addressed in every possible way, and therefore hasn't been fully healed. And I'll get more into that as I get into the commentary. But looking into that and letting you know the approach, especially as a self-mastery and awakening journey traveler, needs to approach in order to fully heal these issues and move past them once and for all. So here we go. Well, first of all, some of you maybe you've done some self-work, but you've wondered kind of, what does healing really mean? And what is it that I'm supposed to heal? What needs healing? So, in order to understand that, we need to look at what your awakening journey really is and what it really means. And at its core, your journey it's the path to your fullest possible alignment with and embodiment of core self, soul, its higher order consciousness, its will, and its purpose in this lifetime. Healing is the process of identifying, acknowledging, and then taking steps to let go of the thoughts, beliefs, emotions, behaviors in your life that are keeping you from being able to advance soul's growth and progression. And the way you do that, as I said, is you have to first identify them and acknowledge them. And then you have to take steps to either let go of, transmute, or transcend them. And this is what healing really is. Okay, so got that? Okay. Now, let's look at some of the various situations that you may have encountered along your journey. And all of these are common to people on this journey. So you're not alone here. These are very common. In fact, they're very common to many people, whether or not they're on this journey. But as I said, they can be more intensely experienced because you're on this journey and all that implies. So one of the more common ones is feeling alone, isolated, or unsupported on your journey. And you've heard, whether you're getting it online, or maybe somebody that is in your life is telling you, the conventional standard approach. Well, just get out there, Bob. Just get out there and meet people and go, participate in various events and so forth. And that's not to say that there isn't some validity in that. But for whatever reasons, that boilerplate approach is not appropriate to your particular situation or a good fit for you and the way you function. Maybe you live in a place where even if you wanted to get out and go meet other people that may be on this journey, but you live in a place, a town, maybe a small town or even a big city, and you can't seem to find any events that feel like a good fit. And by that I mean sometimes these events are filled with a lot of new age, love and light kind of people, and you've been there and done that, and that's not going to fit. Again, that's not to say that you maybe don't keep trying to get out there, but you feel frustrated because you've explored and there's either a limited number of these types of events, or the ones that you do participate in, you don't seem to jive with anybody else that's there. So that's a common situation. Another situation, you're feeling really worried or stressed and sometimes hopeless about work or financial related difficulties. This is common to a lot of people on this journey, not only because of economy influences and things like that, but a lot has to do with the fact that you're on this journey and you're trying to make perhaps a transition from the kind of work you were doing or an area in which you were working because it's no longer aligned with the focus of your journey. And this can sometimes create financial difficulties and strains that over the course of time chip away. They can chip away at your self-esteem. So that's another common experience. Perhaps you're going through the agonizing after effects of a toxic relationship. One that you either chose to step out of after you felt more empowerment on your journey, or just kind of ended up blowing up in your face as a result of the work you've been doing. But you keep reliving the traumatic events themselves with no end in sight because you don't know how to stop reliving the trauma. Just keeps playing out over and over and over. You keep asking yourself, what could I have done differently? Why did this happen? What could I have done differently? What will I do now? Why can't I stop experiencing this? I'm not in it anymore, so why do I keep having these experiences? You had some idea, perhaps, that for the most part, that the issues, the misery that you were going through in that relationship would be taken care of once you're, removed from the situation. And yes, there is an immediate relief, a sense of relief, and some of your suffering is relieved at first blush. But it's virtually inevitable. You might be different. I cannot presume to speak to everyone who's going through this. But in my experience, personally, as well as in working with clients, there is a grieving process that must be undergone along with some other work. But just because you're not with that person anymore and undergoing the day-to-day trauma does not mean that you are healed. So that's another common tough situation. Working through a toxic relationship and healing from that. Perhaps you're still in a toxic relationship and you know you need to move on, but you absolutely do not know how. You have some perhaps sense of obligation to remaining in that relationship. And that needs to be addressed as well. Another common situation is feeling overwhelmed and stressed out just by the day-to-day living in our reality, the system of control, the matrix, if you will. Just trying to maintain balance and equilibrium and some sense of inner peace in just having to deal with day-to-day situations. Whether it's, having to address, like I said, work and income issues, financial issues. Perhaps you're raising children and trying to get them schooled and taken care of properly. You're trying to be a good parent. Maybe you're dealing with things like car troubles, that, excuse me, that kind of thing. A myriad of challenges arising from that. And sometimes you feel like you're just being inundated by that. And as a result, you feel like you have less and less time, and you certainly have less energy to be doing your awakening and self-mastery progression work. So that's very, very common. The everyday stresses of living in the matrix. That can get the best of a lot of people. Another common situation is feeling like you've been bombarded with a string of minor or perhaps even major health issues. And sometimes, or often, they feel like they've just come out of nowhere. You can't seem to find a logical explanation or source for these little ailments or big ailments. And so you're starting to feel down and distressed by that, perhaps getting really worried about your health or frightened. So that's another common issue, a situation that many find themselves in. Another situation that's very common is living in fear of negative entity interference or attack or alien interference. Perhaps you're feeling almost paralyzed with fear because you feel like a powerless victim. You either have no idea how to defend yourself, or you're trying different things, but none of them seem to be working for you. So you're feeling more and more powerless and victimized. Even if the interferences or attacks aren't even that common, but you live in such dread of that you feel virtually paralyzed in your life. So that's another big one. Another common issue is feeling really disheartened or deeply distressed by a troubling family or significant other relationship or a relationship with a friend. Now, it isn't necessarily toxic, or you don't believe that it's necessarily toxic in nature, but it's a troubled relationship. And it seems like no matter what steps you take, and you feel like you're taking good steps as you become more and more aware of what you really are and how reality really works, but it seems like the harder you try, or whatever you try doesn't seem to be working. And in many cases, the situation seems to be getting worse. So those are just a few. There's many others, but those are some of the more common negative situations that we can find ourselves in on this journey, and can be very intense and distressing for us. And as a result, our journey's progress is greatly impaired, because anything in our lives that interferes with our mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual well-being and stability, by default, interferes with our awakening journey progress. So the two go hand in hand. Now, how do these situations unfold in our lives? Well, as I said, you're very unique, and the way that these situations unfold is unique to you. However, once again, there are common symptoms and consequences of being in negative situations. Or perhaps you're no longer even in there's maybe not even a particular pressing situation in your life right now. There was in the past maybe. But you're still so emotionally and psychologically invested in that past situation that the effect is the same. The effect in your life is the same. So when we are going through these experiences, it can often feel like you're drowning. You feel like sometimes you're going under. And to keep from drowning, you end up doing and saying things that give ego a sense of safety, security, comfort, or control in your life. But because these behaviors are ego-driven, they are false self-survival mechanisms that almost invariably end up sabotaging your mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual well-being, and therefore your awakening and self-mastery progress. So what do some of these unfoldments look like? How are they playing out in our lives? The consequences and side effects of these current or past negative situations. Maybe you notice that you've become more testy or unreasonable or just downright antagonistic in your dealings with other people, whether it be people in your life, your personal and professional relationships, or total strangers. And this defensive, really aggressive sort of behavior in your interactions with people. Or perhaps you have no personal or professional boundaries at all because you've lost a sense of self. And maybe you've resigned yourself to being a doormat for everyone in the name of compassion, because you don't yet quite understand the real meaning of love and self-love. Maybe you don't trust anyone anymore, or yourself. Maybe you overeat or indulge too often in foods that you know aren't healthy for you. Or you drink too much, or you use harmful substances. Maybe you have started justifying and rationalizing emotionally or psychologically abusing someone else, or being abused in that way yourself. Maybe you've just completely started shutting down, or you've become an extremist in terms of survival. in the matrix, and potential economic collapse, or weather events, or attacks from our government or other countries or whatever, but all in the name of protecting yourself. So you're just cutting yourself off bit by bit from the rest of the world to the best of your ability. Maybe you're just feeling so depressed or anxious when you are alone that, this is the opposite, that you've become addicted to being around other people, whether that's in person or by phone or through social media or whatever, because you simply can't stand to be alone. You just feel like you're no longer able to even be by yourself. So that's another big one. And perhaps you're willing to settle for, or you have been settling for, connecting with anyone, whether or not you feel energetically aligned with them, just so you don't have to feel alone. Your standards are dropping. Maybe you've started wallowing in your negative emotions, and you can't seem to help yourself when it comes to sharing with others everything that you're going through. So you're caught in that cycle. Or maybe you've become completely numb to your feelings because you've been suppressing them for so long in order to get through the situations you're in. Maybe you feel empty. Maybe you feel like you don't really know yourself anymore or like yourself. And this typically happens as a result of ego having taken control of your life. And so much so that your sense of self-worth is sourced in things outside yourself instead of being sourced from within. And the kinds of things that you've become identified with and define yourself by, relationships, your work or career, your education or knowledge, what you know. You take self-worth from that. Your financial worth. Feel good when you have money, don't feel good when you don't. Your personal possessions, the things that you surround yourself with. Maybe you've become a shopaholic, or that you're so attached to the things that you do have that the thought of losing them spins you into a state of extreme stress or anxiety. How can I get along without my hair dryer? I'm oversimplifying here, but you get the idea. Or if I don't have a certain kind of car, that sort of thing. But your material possessions, or your worth comes from your social standing, the way that you view yourself in terms of social strata, or your false persona, the way that you want others to see you and perceive you. whether or not those have anything to do with who you really are. But you panic at the thought of being found out. And your sense of self-worth is tied to that. Maybe it's tied to the way you look, or your life roles, such as parent, provider, mother, daughter, brother, employer, employee, your life roles. But these ego identifications and attachments are often the most insidious byproducts of the negative situations and experiences you've had. In other words, they sort of sneak up on us. We're not even aware of the fact that these harmful behaviors, whether self-harmful or harmful to others, where they've come from. We have no idea. We're doing these things, and because they're so subtle and they come up, they start arising in our lives in such subtle ways that many times we're not even aware that some of the things we are doing are harmful. And even if we do, the steps that we take to stop them aren't really effective. We're just caught in this constant cycle. Maybe you're trying to lose weight, and so you keep trying all these different diets, and maybe some of them work for a while, but then you keep going back. You keep falling back into the old habits that cause weight problems in the first place. So, in other words, none of the issues are ever resolved because we're not getting to the core. And as I said, I've just mentioned a handful of the types of situations that you may be experiencing or have experienced, and the different, just a handful of the different ways they can play out in your life. They can unfold in myriad ways that are unique to you and your situation, and they do so due to various determining factors, and there's a lot to that, but that's another commentary. Anyway, all of these behaviors, what they really are, and the way that's most helpful to view them, is to see them as warning signs that are symptomatic of a current situation that you haven't really grasped yet, or a past situation that you have and that you thought you'd moved through, that you thought you'd healed it, that you'd fully addressed it. In any case, the longer you ignore these signals, the more your current relationships, your life circumstances, and your overall mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual well-being are put at risk and continue to be subject to further deterioration. Seeing all of these situations and the way they unfold, even if you have no idea why you may be doing certain things that you know aren't good for you, looking at them and finding out what their source is, why you're doing them, is key to being able to get them out of your life once and for all, instead of just sometimes you don't, sometimes you do. So, and as I said earlier, these kinds of situations and unfoldments are not unique by any means to awakening and self-mastery travelers, people on this journey. In fact, most of them are not. But most who seek to get out of them are doing so for the sole purpose of alleviating their suffering. And that's good and well. But as an awakening self-mastery journey traveler who wants to make progress, it's critical not only that you move beyond them, get out of them, start moving beyond them, but that you heal them at their root levels. Otherwise, their destructive side effects continue to subvert your well-being and accordingly your self-mastery awakening progress. Complete healing. And as I said, as an empath, I understand the extent and depth of this suffering from working with my clients. I feel it. But I've also experienced it personally in my own life and had to address healing and move through that. And have I totally healed in every area, in every aspect of my life? Of course not. But I'm making progress in every area because I now address these issues from multiple perspectives. And here's what I mean. You're a unique, complex, multi-layered, multifaceted being who lives in a multifaceted, complex, multi-layered reality. And as such, deep, complete healing of any negative issue or situation in your life warrants a holistic, multi-tiered approach that specialized areas alone or oversimplified kind of boilerplate methodologies simply can't address. And the steps that you take to actually begin healing that are going to actually help you make progress are those that are attuned to you, that and your uniqueness and your specific situation and life circumstances. That's when healing and the process of healing goes exponential. And in turn, your mental, emotional, psychological, physical, and spiritual vitality immediately starts increasing. And the result of all of this is that you begin making progress on your journey on a regular basis. Your successes feed on themselves. The more progress you make on your journey, the better you feel about yourself. The better you feel about yourself, the more your well-being is increased. Because you're taking steps that, you create this self-perpetuating cycle of success and your healing. This process of self-evolution, soul's progress, soul's journey, with which we are seeking to align, be fully aligned with, and embody. It's the undertaking of your lifetime. Whatever your situation, or your relationships, whatever you're experiencing right now, this is the most important thing you can do, without exception. And here's why. And I don't mean at the expense of dealing with financial issues or getting a job that pays you a decent income, or at the expense of your, like I said, your relationships with significant other people in your life. Like I said, your partner, your friends, family members. It's not at their expense, but because of them that you undertake this work, because it is through this work that all of those situations and relationships and circumstances are improved. And I know this sounds counterintuitive to some of you, but it's the truth. This is the way the process works. I didn't design it. I didn't lay it out, but this is the way reality works. It's about taking steps that seem counterintuitive to ego. Well, of course they would. Ego's not true self. Ego does in no way function in the same way that soul, core self functions. So ego was never intended to be the driving force in our lives. It was designed as this remarkable tool, this instrument as part of the mind-body complex to help soul, core self experience itself in physicality, material reality, and be able to navigate through it. It was not intended to be our driving mechanism. But due to millennia spanning programming and genetic tampering and all that implies, ego has become the dominant force, the driving force in our lives. And this begins from the moment we're born. We are entrained into ego dominance. That's not to blame our parents or caregivers, because that's the way they were entrained. And that's the way their parents and caregivers were entrained. And on and on and on. So this isn't about blame. This is about acknowledging the truth of our reality and the place where we currently find ourselves in this reality, so that we can move beyond that entrainment and start leading the kind of meaningful, fulfilling lives that we were born to live. And that doesn't mean a life without challenges. No siree. But seeing those challenges, every single one of them, as incredible opportunities to keep progressing on our journeys, because that's what they really are. I don't adhere to the notion that, per se, our reality is a school, but there are many lessons, so to speak, that soul wants to experience so that it can keep progressing. But you're not apart from that. This is why we want to align. This is why we seek to align with soul's desires and its purpose. Because when we start getting closer and closer and more attuned to that, then that's when life becomes magical. Doesn't mean that you don't have challenges. But that's when greatness occurs. Now, what I want to put out there Many of you, even though you've done, or many of you have done some healing work, self-work, and perhaps you've worked with someone else in that process. But perhaps you've never done that. You're just going it alone. You get all the information you can, through books, um, online, websites and so forth. And that's great. But it ain't so great if you feel like your progress on your journey is really sluggish, or it's come to a standstill because you're trying to deal with, but perhaps not very successfully, with some of these negative situations and some of these behaviors in your life that are really holding you back. And oftentimes in ways that you don't even realize. So you feel frustrated or discouraged, and perhaps even more and more inclined, or I should say less and less inclined, to do the work of progression. Maybe you're starting to come to the point where you're doubting, you're questioning yourself as to why the heck you got on this journey in the first place. Because your progress is so slow or stilted. And so you start doubting the whole process itself and justifying not working and taking steps to keep moving forward. Or perhaps some of you feel like you've already gotten so far off track that you've lost confidence in your ability to get back on track and in the flow of progression. Well, I am offering something that's going to be of help to many of you, and that I hope that you'll give serious consideration. I am offering free 1-hour consultation, a 1-hour session with me. No risk, no obligation. And I can tell you that an hour can make a huge difference in your life when your issues are addressed wholly from multiple perspectives. When you start gaining insights around their root level causes. All of them. In the course of an hour, in the course of this 1-hour session with me, you will not only gain those deep insights around your most pressing issue, insights that empower you to be able to start achieving complete healing, but you're going to understand why you have been making choices of thought, feeling, and behavior that keep you stuck in the situation, and continually suffering its harmful side effects or after effects. And you'll be equipped to start making choices that support rather than sabotage your desired positive self-transformation. By the end of your session, you will receive a practical next steps action plan that you can implement immediately to start shifting from disempowering distress and discouragement on your journey to self-empowered joy, inner peace, and progress. You'll know how to begin making changes that last. Not just temporary fixes, quick fixes, or quick fix behaviors that you latch onto so that you don't feel like you're drowning. And maybe they alleviate your suffering for the moment, but sometimes midstream or shortly thereafter, you know that you're going to go back into this place of distress or suffering. You know that they're quick fixes. On some level of you knows this. So it's really easy, and you have nothing to risk, nothing to lose, to learn what you can do, why you're doing what you're doing, why you're stuck where you are, and how to heal that. Some definitive, practical, next step actions that you can take to start healing and moving beyond once and for all these negative issues and situations in your life. So I'm going to put links below, a link below, so that you can get more information that I invite you to check out. Because if you're serious about making progress on your journey and you're feeling stuck, and the things that you're doing, the steps that you're taking, the methodologies perhaps that you're using, or the tools and practices that you're using don't seem to be getting you anywhere or very far, what do you have to lose? And you may just change your life in that hour. Anyway, I'm going to call it a wrap on that note. If you have any questions whatsoever about the free session, please feel free to contact me. You can do so on my contact form. If you haven't already signed up, I hope you'll join my, subscribe to YouTube, or better still, subscribe on my site. And that way you find out, you'll get firsthand notice as to what I'm doing as these other things start coming out, these other courses and programs and my book and so forth. But in the meantime, why wait? Why wait? It's an hour of your time. And I may not be offering this for very long, but I want to make it available to those that are serious about this process and about making progress in it. Those who, you feel like you can't justify, or you simply don't have any money to spend right now. So why on earth would you hesitate? In any case, take a chance. No risk. And until we meet again, I wish you the best of success on your journey, on your travels. And until we meet again, take care.